Hello and welcome to The Forge, where you can get your regular dose of Realogy and reclaim your awareness. Going to once again do another social commentary video, breaking from the episode format a little bit, and today's commentary is going to be on the Hebrew heritage discussion that's been going on. I know I'm catching this conversation a little bit late, but that's because the conclusion is going to be a little difficult for some people to receive, I know, and I wanted to take the extra time to make sure I was laying out the argument the right way and not rushing to just try to catch the wave of the discussion that was going on, because I think that the conclusion of this conversation is important, and I wanted to make sure I kind of, again, arrived to that conclusion in a way that made sense. And especially because there's been so much controversy around this topic. And I just kind of want to weigh in real quick, mainly because I think that there is an outcome that's being pushed from both sides that I don't really care for, I guess is the best way to say it. And I think there's a better way to address this, and I think that the truth about what's being chased after is not known. So kind of, again, building on some of the content that's already been discussed in this channel, but I want to hit on a few more specific topics and address why I think, again, there's not a good outcome in the way that this discussion is going right now. And I kind of want to set things straight, following, again, the outcome or the desired outcome of what I've stated in other videos here. So again, a lot of discussions that are going on right now, a lot of cancellations regarding this media power structure in the US being monopolized by a specific group. And unfortunately, the most extreme voices always get the most airplay, right? And these extreme voices are going to force a mostly moderate population to either side of an extreme that they partially agree with, or go run into the arms of the opposite side, feeling like it's their only reprieve or only place to go to kind of be heard. Again, I think most people are usually mostly in the middle. And I think these extreme voices really get things way out of hand and really play up and amplify rhetoric that I think is just not where most people are. All right. So if you can't tell from my other videos, my goal is to help the masses see their way to a unified humanity. And that's by providing an alternative to the extreme voices that are so distracting and a lot of times so destructive. And on this popular current topic, I do have some points, some that I agree with, some that I disagree with. None of my conclusions are going to fit the mainstream. I'm sure you guys can probably see that that's the case by now. I don't really care about that. More so looking at chasing facts or chasing what I can experience or observe, and kind of going off of that. So conclusions may not be mainstream, but I think them true, and I think that they have a better outcome than if we were to let the extreme viewpoints argue this out to their conclusion in front of us in the national media. So let's talk about what these unpopular views are. It'll allow us to get back to fixing the problems that we're collectively facing right now. Okay? The first, all right, and again, I know people even start to stray away from even using names. I'm going to use the names. I'm not saying anything hateful. If that was what I was doing on this channel, then you guys should turn away, right? I'm not saying anything hateful. I'm not speaking out for one group or against another. Just the way my mindset works, right? And what I think we're supposed to be getting at and what we're supposed to be targeting. So the people that are currently identified as Jewish, okay? Now, for one, there's recent photographic evidence, and when I say recent, I'm talking within the past century, that their descendants, the people that are currently identified and widely known as the Jewish or Israelite people, there's a lot of photographic evidence from things that happened around World War II, that their descendants died by the millions in German concentration camps, both rich and poor alike. And they died for bearing this name association, okay? They died being called and associated as Jews, to the tune of 6 million people, all right? And journalism back then had a lot more integrity and a lot more autonomy. It's not like the fake news culture that's going on today. So I think it's just kind of a jerk move to deny the photographic evidence. And it's this, yeah, maybe it brings you some followers and brings you some people that kind of love to hear that, but the photographic evidence is there. There's a lot of legal documentation. There's a lot of documents and information out there, period, that proves that this is irrelevant. The fact that we even have this discussion is stupid to me. It's pointless. But regardless, the information is out there. Let's not deny that. So in that information that's out there, again, it shows the evidence that their people were killed in the millions just for this name association. All right. So what does that mean? I also want to call out, realize that this event having a lot of their descendants, or ancestors rather, killed in a concentration camp, they're not the first ones that have had that happen either. So it doesn't make them unique in that regard. The numbers weren't quite as high, but not the first time. And I found this interesting to me because the first I'd heard of a concentration camp was for World War II Germany and what they did to the Jews at that time. So it was fascinating to me to learn that no, there was actually a history of concentration camps before that. Because we look at it and say, man, they were extremely efficient, not only in how quickly they built the concentration camps, how well hidden they were from the German population. A lot of the civilians there didn't know that was happening. A lot of the soldiers that weren't even on site at the time weren't aware that some of these things were happening, okay? So you got to ask the question, like, how did they really just decide to put this plan in action and were so proficient with it right around that late 1930s, early 1940s time frame? And the answer is no. The concentration camp design was employed first by British colonies during the South African War and was later perfected by Germans in a West African colony, again, concentration camps in Africa. And this colony was established in 1904, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Luderitz, Namibia, also known as Shark Island or Death Island, okay? This camp was later turned into a field lab for eugenic studies. They studied the physical traits of the children that were born between the European, the white German soldiers there, and the native African women that met and sometimes, again, had families, married, and everything else in this lab after the concentration camp part of it was dismantled. But again, the fact that they had this little community of mostly white fathers and mostly black mothers, they were able to study the passing on of their physical characteristics, their genetic traits. So this became a very interesting place for eugenic studies, and this was inspired by actually the cousin of Charles Darwin, Francis Dalton, was one of the first eugenicists, or one of the scientists whose data and his studies were very key to the kicking off of eugenic studies. And what was done here also later inspired the likes of R.A. Fisher and Charles Davenport, both of them who had work that was referenced for like the Eugenics Records Office science that was used for some negative things here. Okay, so again, yes, this happened. Their ancestors died by the millions in Germany. Wasn't the first place it happened, and again, if that qualifies the people as Jews, this happened in Africa first, right? So just is what it is, right? But again, I'm not going to try to take away that, as far as I'm concerned, whether or not you agree that they were the group identified in the Bible as the Hebrews, they bled and died for this identity, period, okay? And for that regard alone, 6 million of their people have been killed just for this name association. They've earned the right, as far as I'm concerned, to be called whatever they tell you they are. And again, you'll see that I'm just not really one big on names or big on identities that have to be held up against somebody else and that could later be used as a justification or reasons to think we're better than, worse than, or more deserving of one group of people or another. Okay, so that's just generally something I shy away from. But regardless, if this is how they want to be identified, I have no problem with that. I don't care. That's fine. Second major point. Okay, the documentary referenced by Kyrie Irving that was on Amazon Prime shows you really what's always been in front of us in the Bible, period. He talked about a lot of scriptures and pulled a lot of those passages out that have always been there. So anybody that did not want to acknowledge that, it's because you didn't want to see it. It is what it is. Again, it's not even a big point. You're going to see, don't celebrate too early, because you're probably not going to like what I have to say at the end for the conclusion here. But I think he's showing verses about the just details that have always been there in front of us. I don't think any of that has changed. Okay. Some of that evidence, there is the artwork of the siege of Lachish from 701 BC in the British Museum that shows knotty bearded and knotty haired Judean prisoners going off to the Assyrian captivity. Also, the name Ham, one of Noah's sons, the name means hot or sunburnt. His sons, Cush, which became the nation of Ethiopia, Mizraim, which became the nation of Egypt, and Put, which became the nation of Libya. All of these nations have colored populations. Again, the evidence has always been there, just people don't want to see it for whatever reason. That's fine. I don't care if you do or don't. It's just the information has been there. It is what it is. Also, keep in mind, Moses passed as an Egyptian person, right? So this has always been the case, right? So black skin, mentioned in Job 30, brass colored skin in Ezekiel 40:3, Daniel 10:6, Revelation 1:15, Revelation 2:18. It's always been talking about the Hebrews as people of color. Again, not to mention what Ham's name actually is. The data's always been there, and also the references to hair like wool, Daniel 7:9, Revelation 1:14. This is stuff that's always been there. We're talking about scriptures in the Bible that have always been there and always had these hints, these clues that the population was colored. But whether they were or not really doesn't matter. It's just that it's such a hot topic this, in this day and age, and things that are going on right now. And again, I see these things being used to accomplish outcomes and conclusions that I don't necessarily care for, and why I want to talk about this right now. So I want to try to quickly get through some of these other topics. It's going to sound like I'm going to a lot of different random points. I do try to bring it back in at the end. Just be patient with me for a little bit, okay? But even when we consider all these things, we have to acknowledge the fact that the Bible or the Torah, wherever you're getting the information from about these people, it is absolutely filled with so many passages describing how God intended to scatter this people across the face of the earth for various reasons, various punishments. But that has been stated very many times, and we've seen it done in the scriptures, Torah or the Bible, very many times. And you just have to be rational about it. No matter what color skin people claim to be the descendants from this group, if you've ever considered how people look as you traverse our planet, you'll notice that everyone looks a little bit different, right? We're mostly the same, but there are going to be little slight differences in the way that everybody looks. How could you expect a people who has been scattered around the planet, across the face of the planet, to maintain any single homogeneous look? It's not going to happen. It simply will not happen. It's not possible. You should expect as much variety within this group as you would expect to see in the entire world that they've been scattered amongst, right? They've been scattered from one corner of the planet to the other. They've mixed with those people as they've gone there. They're going to look like everybody. And that's what I think is the true reality behind all this. So the racial component of this argument to me is not very productive. You could probably go to almost any corner of the world and find somebody that has some kind of tie back to this group, because again, this is a group of people that no matter how they looked at that time, they've been spread out. They've mixed in with the populations that they moved to. And the way that they would look today is going to be, again, a sample from every place they've been scattered to. You're not going to find any one group, racial group or otherwise, that's going to be able to say, I am the sole descendant of this group. It's just not possible. They've been spread. They've mixed in with the population. Their descendants are everywhere. So it doesn't bias anything for one group to claim, I'm the only one, I'm the real descendant from this group. But documentarians usually sink themselves into the work to deliver a message. I'm going to talk about the one from this one. So in light of all those things, at the conclusion of the documentary was a message I do not agree with. Okay? At the conclusion of the documentary was a message I do not agree with. It may be true that Europeans found the branch of Ashkenazi Jews to be a better fit for their narrative that Jesus and his ancestors and descendants look more like the preferred image of, I'm just going to say the English way of saying it, Caesar Borgia. I know if you pronounce it in Latin or in Italian, it's different, but regardless, Caesar Borgia, okay? It was more fitting that, that's the image that they've commonly painted Jesus to look like, and that's what everybody wants to tout as, everybody around him, all of his descendants and ancestors look the same. Again, regardless, I don't care. It's just, it fit that plan, but no one is alive today that was a part of that plan. Okay, so harboring anger, frustration, wanting to get back at somebody, those people are all dead, right? So if you think people are benefiting from it today, okay, that's a different discussion. But the people that executed that plan or thought this was a great idea to do it like this, what people call whitewashing or whatever, those people are all gone. Okay, so you can't change what they've done. It's there. You want to call back and reference that maybe the history is something different. Okay, but let's understand why we're saying that and why we're making these points in the first place. If the cherished prize, which is, again, the conclusion of the documentary, if this cherished prize is a rush back to reclaim the status of Yahweh's chosen people, let's at least understand what those people were chosen to. We often think and accept that it means the chosen people, the preferred people, the ones that'll be elevated above everybody else, the ones that'll have rule in the world to come, all these other things. And that's why everybody's clamoring back. You know, the chosen people means we are going to have power in the world to come and all these other things. I think that there's a different narrative at play here, okay? In episode 6 on this channel, I've addressed that I believe that time has obfuscated the fact that the Hebrews, whomever you think they were not aware that what they learned to worship in the wilderness is not the benevolent spirit that we think of and what we're told today, okay? I believe Jesus was sent to specifically dispel the religious residue that was left to stain the world by the same serpent-like beings that were at work in the Garden of Eden. And if we go clamoring back to reclaim our heritage, we may not realize that we'll be merely in for a repeat of what happened in Numbers 21. And we're going to end up falling down in worship to this image of a fiery serpent. And if that's what some people want, that's fine. You can count me out. All right. Now, I have no desire to devote my spiritual energy, my mental energy, my financial energy once more to something that has so little regard for human life ever again. I've been there, done that. And my mindset is different now. And this is what I think is at stake for us and waiting for us if we go clamoring back to reclaim this heritage. Furthermore, one of the strongest proofs that was used in the, I'll just call it the the Hebrews to Negroes documentary. It's just the name, it's the title of the documentary, right? Again, I'm not supporting it, denying it, whatever. That's just the name of the documentary. But one of the strongest proofs used in there to prove his point is very specifically one of the reasons that I don't understand why everyone of color is not simultaneously turning and running in the opposite direction. The fact that he makes this point that these curses are still around today, we'll look at in a little bit. I'm not going to go directly to the curses necessarily, but we'll kind of talk about it in a little bit. But there is a very telling message in Deuteronomy 28, okay? The passage starts off with beautiful promises and words of endearment. I'm just showing them on the screen here, 14 verses here, Deuteronomy 28, verses 1 through 14 that show all of these. If you do this thing that I've told you to do, this is how I'm going to bless you, how I'll make sure that you're happy and satisfied and filled and rich and all these other things. Great. 14 verses of beautiful promises and commitments here. But after these 14 wonderful verses, you have 52 verses of curses. You're either expecting something bad or you're planning a lot more pits and traps for people to be able to kind of fall into, and a lot more things basically that, you know, can go wrong than can go right. It's already telling you that right from the structure of this chapter. But the documentary uses a lot of those, you know, those 52 verses and all the curses that are pronounced there as evidence that, yes, this is really talking about those of African descent, because you still see some of those things at play for people with that descent in the modern day and age, okay? Now, the documentary makes an argument that I do agree with. There is no group of people in this present day and age that seems to so thoroughly identify with these curses as those of African descent, okay? Thus, the documentarian argues that we need to reclaim our status as the chosen ones of the God of the Hebrews, so as to reverse the curses upon curses in all of these verses. And just, you know, playing around with the words there a little bit, but regardless, right? But we think that going back and reclaiming our status and obedience to the God of the Hebrews is going to undo all of these negative things that we see in Deuteronomy 28. Now, I'm personally less inclined to crawl back to serve an entity who abhors humans enough to pronounce almost 4 times more curses than blessings, and with the effect of those curses lasting the better part of 4,000 years. If we are saying that the words spoken in Deuteronomy 28 still apply to those of African descent today, you're talking about something that was nearly 4,000 years ago. And those curses, if you're to believe that those curses identify for you correctly who are the recipients of those things, this has been a curse that has been on your people for more than 4,000 years. Now, I know the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, it's been because of disobedience and everything else. We're going to look at that, okay? But if these Deuteronomy 28 verses of curses identify those of African descent as the Hebrews, then this is what the Hebrews were chosen to for 4,000 years. Regardless of whatever you think it's going to mean in the end, this has been 4,000 years of a curse that your people have been carrying. And this is what you're trying to go clamor back to because you think that reclaiming that rightful heritage and obedience is going to bring you something different. Unless what's been happening for 4,000 years, why would you keep something like that going if it wasn't benefiting you in some way? It wasn't bringing some kind of benefit back to the pronouncer of the curses. This seems to be the preferred state. We haven't seen anything change. We haven't seen the kind of divine intervention that we've seen in the scriptures, which again just kind of further tells us that the story is something different than what we've been taught it is, okay? In Numbers 21, the Hebrews were tricked by a serpent to violate what they were just commanded to do, if you believe the narrative. The second of 10 commandments in Exodus says the following. Verse 4, Exodus 20, verse 4, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Okay? Now, the seriousness of this instruction is further displayed in Exodus 32, when Moses had the Levites slay all of those who encouraged Aaron to make the golden calf for them to worship while Moses was up in the mount. Okay? So you have the commandment here given, and you think God's playing, you think he's not serious about it. Boom. He comes down from the mountain, from getting the instruction on the tablets, and proceeds to go and kill those who made this, a graven image, right? Who violated this commandment. He shows that he's serious, and thousands die on that day. Okay. But later, after the people complained and asked for food in Numbers 21, we're told that God sent fiery serpents to once again kill the people who didn't fall in line without question. Okay? Now, in the urgency of this situation and in his desire to put a fast end to the death of his people, when Moses sought, quote unquote, God for a solution, now mind you, people are dying while this discourse is happening, while he's begging God, can we fix this situation? Can you please stop? People are dying real time while this is all happening. Okay? Now, he doesn't have the luxury of time to go and consider that the solution given to him is an exact repeat of this golden calf incident. And it's in direct opposition to the second commandment that he so recently received and declared. God told you not to make a graven image. And here, later on, as a solution to this problem, you think God is telling you to make a graven image. Okay? Something is wrong. Now, he is instructed to make a brass fiery serpent to hold up above the people, so anyone who looks up to this brass idol can live. And he rushes off to obey this murderous entity so that he doesn't become another casualty with the rest of his people. Now, the evil power that stayed its murderous hand for those who obediently looked up to this idol after being bitten, which was finally destroyed by a righteous king, Hezekiah, I think it was, after being worshipped for 700 more years after this event. Okay, this is the same power that's being wielded today against those who match the descriptions that were shown earlier. Those descendants of Abraham with dark skin and woolly hair. Okay, and since this evil has gone unnoticed, their methods have not needed to change. It masquerades as something good in order to sway well-intentioned people against their better judgment and to wield fear to accomplish lifelong servitude. It's a very effective tool. They've always known that, and it's always been their primary means of working, their primary tool, so to speak. And this is how Constantine also succeeded in the largest Christian conversion in documented history. Okay? So brief sidebar here, Constantine rose to power in the early 4th century while Rome was a tetrarchy, meaning it had 4 rulers. It wasn't necessarily 4 quadrants, but in 4 parts. 4 kings, Caesars, however you want to call it. And Christianity at the time was still a minority religion and a persecuted sect. And while the majority of Roman citizens were still practitioners of their old religions, those religions were later declared to be pagan. Okay? Now, the majority population was very raucous, was rebellious, and outspoken if they didn't like their rulers or their decisions. Now, undoubtedly, while witnessing and overseeing such atrocities as Christians being torn apart by wild animals in the Colosseum simply for sport and entertainment, Constantine noticed something different about the Christian population. They never fought back. Okay? They never fought back. Even while they were being unjustly treated and persecuted, they accepted it. They humbly and quietly accepted their executions as a badge of honor and as a symbol of their devotion. This was not like the rest of the Roman population at the time. They didn't fight back or oppose the rule of government, and even when it treated them with extreme injustice and prejudice. This was because their religion taught them this obedience. Romans 13, verse 1, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. It's a pretty strong, powerful verse. They're telling you if you disobey government, you're going to be counted worthy of damnation here. Down in verse 6, for this cause pay tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear is due, and honor to whom honor is due. Okay? We see more in Titus 3. Put them in mind to be subject to the principalities and powers, and to obey magistrates, to speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, and showing all meekness unto all men. Also in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13, submit yourself to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors, as unto them that are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. Okay? And in the end of verse 17, honor the king. Servants, be subject to your own masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. Whether they're nice to you or not, you still have to show them honor. Okay, now for this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience towards God endures grief, suffering wrongfully. Okay, if when you do well, you suffer for it and take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. Who when he was, this is talking about Jesus now in verse 23, who when he was reviled not again, and when he suffered, he threatened not, but he committed himself to him that judges righteously. So, seeing all these things written in their scriptures, and that the people so confidently and vehemently obeyed this instruction, a light came on for Constantine. He saw the key to his ambitions to unite the Roman Empire again under a single ruler, but not like it had been done before. To do so with very little to no resistance or opposition from the masses. Okay? Now, in order to do this, he basically needed a Christian population. He would feign a vision and declare that he was officially a convert to Christianity. And if the emperor is now part of this population that has been persecuted up until now, he's obviously become not only a hero to the Christians because they think it's going to stop, but he's going to be a hero with the power to enforce his newfound religion on the quote-unquote pagan Roman population. And that's exactly what he did. Constantine began to forbid using the slaughter of Christians as mere entertainment and began to chart the path to make Christianity the state religion of Rome. He converted pagan temples to Christian temples, kept the artwork, kept a lot of the stories, kept a lot of the history there, which made it very hard to disassociate Christianity from the pagan religion and the artifacts and everything else that were there, and a lot of those things bled over into the Christian mindset. He converted pagan holidays like the Feast of Ishtar and Saturnalia into Easter and Christmas, respectively. And he installed new legislation over time to forbid non-Christian beliefs, books, and so on. Constantine was also very consistent with other human monarchs and issued threats of excommunication from the church, exile from Rome, or execution if anyone dared to oppose his instructions. Now, this is very similar to fear tactics often employed to accomplish religious devotion worldwide or service to rulers throughout all time. But Constantine harbored a secret. He didn't really believe his newfound religion. He forced the conversion of his empire to Christianity because of the obedience and the tolerance to corruption and mistreatment that the Christians afforded to him. Okay? There's also a lot of evidence that he continued to practice his beliefs of sun or sun god worship after claiming to be a Christian convert. This pattern was so successful that it became the template for Western civilization for the next 1700 years, and yes, it's still going on, 1700 years and counting. Leaders in the modern Western countries often claim to share the same religious values as the people, but that's mostly for show, desiring that the people hold to their religious beliefs like the passages we just observed, so that they can reap the benefits. Now, I even in thinking about this as I wrote it, I shouldn't just say broadly that most of them are faking, but there's a lot of them that are. Some have been kind of put on the spot to show you, can you name a favorite verse? I love them all, but they'll still make similar statements because it's convenient for them and it works. And if people think that they are talking about a ruler who feels the same way, for whatever reason, people don't want to be honest and recognize it's obvious this person has never touched the Bible, never considered it seriously, but whatever, people accept it. So again, not everybody, granted, but there's quite a few of them that do put on this kind of aura, and it's just mostly hypocritical because as long as they think that, as the Christian population believes they have Christian leaders, they're going to be more inclined to back them. And that's also, I'll kind of say this since this is social commentary again, right? You can't claim to have a love and a commitment to the sanctity of life on one end and also be the most warmongering and murderous nation for others on the other side of that. Those two things don't reconcile. So you have to pick one or the other. For me personally, I don't believe it. You don't tell me that you believe in the right to life while simultaneously robbing so many people of theirs, or allowing businesses to do the same, right? And allowing them to go kind of do this without accountability, and claiming the lives of other people and finding ways to cover that up. So again, for me, that's hypocrisy. And I think that that's why in my mind, a lot of the people that claim that they're following the same beliefs, when you really look at their actions, it doesn't line up. Now, as long as they rule over a Christian population, the probability of violent protests or government opposition is lessened, not gone, but lessened. And the people are mostly tolerant of blatant corruption, blatant lies, theft, hypocrisy, and so much more. Some of the things I just mentioned. Now, this works for a few very powerful reasons. The people believe every leader is established by God for good or bad, based on the verses we just read, and the scriptures command them to be obedient to their government leaders. The people then accept all misbehavior from their leaders, as their religion focuses their hopes and attention away from expecting justice and fair treatment in this life, by telling them that this will all be corrected in the government established in the life to come after you die. How convenient is that? Also, the religious texts convince the people that they must wait for the return of Jesus to set things right. Now, the unspoken part here is that the correction of corrupt government is someone else's job, not yours as the people, and that the population doesn't have the power to do this, which is absolutely wrong. It is only by, one, your tax dollars, two, your agreement to go into the power structure that enforces their rule, police, military, whatever else the case may be. If they didn't have the power of the people behind them, they wouldn't be able to do what they do. But some people, because of the benefits afforded to power, are willing to become pawns and to let it carry on. It's again, until we stop it, it's going to continue. So to this very day, the majority of Christians in the country that I live in, America, are not aware that at least some of the founding fathers held to an entirely different set of beliefs than what they have believed, than what the people have believed. Now, I bet you're wanting proof of how this could possibly be occurring today, that people don't know that the founding fathers didn't really have some of these same beliefs, right? So stay tuned, I'll show you. Now, inversion is perversion. Why am I talking about this? This is a saying meant to convey the intent of certain types of witchcraft to pervert the use and meaning of holy relics and symbols by inverting them, okay? This is just a quick excerpt here. I'm citing the source here at the bottom. Witchcraft, it has often been remarked, is about inversion, where local notions of kinship and community collectively represent the good society. Witchcraft provides a terrifying counter image by playing that image back to front. From this perspective, witchcraft reverses the normal and desirable, rendering it perverse and morally repugnant. And I will just say for the record, I think this is one of the mistakes of kind of classifying all witchcraft as black magic or dark sorcery. I don't think that's the case. I think I know from looking at some of these things that there are practices of witchcraft that are meant for positive things, but this is kind of the old world mentality of all witchcraft is demonic and satanic and everything else. So this is just kind of the way they've always stated and believed these things concerning witchcraft. Point being, witchcraft inverts, dark witchcraft inverts things that are meant to be good or holy to accomplish the opposite result, okay? Now, what does this image mean to you? The upright cross. I'm sure it invokes certain feelings. It reminds you of certain events. And I'm sure it's going to probably give everybody a warm and fuzzy feeling. What about when you turn that image upside down? What does that mean for you now? Right? I'm sure words are coming to your mind, images and everything else. The Omen movie, Exorcist, things like that. You see this popularly in horror movies. People turn the cross upside down as a sign of disrespect, as a perversion of the original usage of the crucifix. All right. Also, what about this image? Right? This is an upright pentagram, okay, 5-pointed star. Again, usually showing some kind of image is going to put something in your mind. So I want you to kind of think through, what do you think about what comes to your mind when this image pops up? What about when you do this? You invert the pentagram, turn it upside down. What does that image bring to your mind? What does that make you think about? While you're thinking of those things, I want you to ask yourself the question, did you notice something wrong? Did you notice an inconsistency? I'll bet that you recognize the upright cross meaning holy, with the inverted cross meaning something demonic, devilish, or evil. The upright cross is something good. You flip that image upside down, you invert it to mean the opposite of something good, and instead of holy, it now means evil. I'm also willing to bet that you associated both the upright pentagram and the inverted pentagram as both being demonic, devilish, or evil, right? You have to ask yourself why that is. Why do we associate the upright cross as holy and the inverted cross as bad, but both the upright and the inverted pentagram is bad. Okay? Probably because of some form of programming. We're going to look at that. You should know why that is. The quick version of the story is that you've been lied to in order that you be disarmed. Okay? The original meaning and usage of the upright pentagram was actually very similar to that of the upright cross or crucifix. It was meant to symbolize many good things. All right? The creative forces employed by God. You see that the top of the pentagram, the upright point, was meant to invoke spirit or mean spirit. You see air, water, earth, and fire. Again, meant to symbolize the 5 creative forces used by God. Also meant to symbolize the perfection of the human body, created on the 5th day in Genesis, also with 5 appendages from its torso. Now, throughout history, and again, I'm going to cite some words here from a website, which I have cited down here in the bottom. Throughout history, the upright pentagram has also been used to ward off and defend against evil spirits, against witches, and against demons. It's been used as a symbol of health, knowledge, protection, and perfection. In the Middle Ages in Europe, it was meant to symbolize the 5 knightly virtues of friendship, generosity, chastity, courtesy, and piety. Among Christians, it has symbolized the 5 wounds of Christ, both of his hands, both of his feet punctured by the crucifixion, and his side pierced by a soldier's spear. In Islam, the pentagram is known as Solomon's seal, and its 5 points are regarded in at least one tradition as representing love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Also, when the 5 appendages of a human are listed as an acronym, arm, leg, arm, head, it spells Allah, the name that Muslims know God by. Then there's the tetragrammaton pentagram, in honor of the Hebrew name for God. Okay? And a lot of other things. The upright pentagram probably fell out of favor with religionists, specifically Christianity, since it is occasionally found use in some occult and magical sects, but always with a positive symbol or for magic with a positive intent when we're talking about the upright version. Also probably fell out of favor with Christianity because the Freemasons sometimes placed a G in the center of an upright pentagram for gnosis, generation, and for the grand architect, which again are things outside of Christianity's comfort zone. Now, the benevolent meaning and uses of this upright pentagram is made obvious also by the fact that it was targeted for inversion. Okay, the inverted pentagram has never been used or conveyed as anything meant for good, ever. Okay, it has always been a symbol of negative magic or devil worship. Inversion of the 5 creative forces diagram that we looked at earlier also places matter, air, earth, fire, and water above spirit. Okay. Now, the inverted pentagram figures in the sigil of Baphomet, which is shown in the lower right here, and one of the main symbols of the Church of Satan, also shown on the left. The sigil of Baphomet depicts a goat with its horns in the upturned points of the star, and this likely stems from a 19th century European revival of occult studies, during which time it was held that a pentagram with 1 point facing upward symbolized ascendance, God, and the supremacy of spirit. Spirit was at the top in the first diagram, remember. Okay, and a pentagram with 1 point facing downward symbolized Satan, infernalism, or everlasting torment, and the descent of the spirit. Okay. Now, again, why does this all matter? What does this have to do with the social topic that I began discussing? Well, it's because many U.S. citizens hold to the belief that the founding fathers were also well-meaning Christians. Now, the evidence that this is not entirely true has been sitting in front of our faces for over 200 years. Now, if not the founding fathers, I'll try to give some benefit of the doubt. If it wasn't the founding fathers around the time that DC was mapped out, whether you want to call those the founders or not, and at, forgive the spell check, the spell error there, at the very least, our capital architect allowed this aforementioned demonic imagery to be prominently displayed in our nation's capital, hidden in plain sight. And I know a lot of people are going to say, I've lived in DC, I've traveled to DC, I've never seen inverted pentagrams anywhere. What are you talking about? You're crazy, conspiracy theorist, whatever else, right? Now, it should be noted that when the sigils are used in witchcraft, before we look at the next slide here, when sigils are used in witchcraft, all right, the size of the sigil is considered to impact the power and the effectiveness of the spell. Normally, you're talking about people drawing these things on a floor, a piece of paper, on a doorway, on a little object of some sort, okay? If we were to look at a sigil that is larger, a lot larger, the witchcraft practitioner would believe that the size of that symbol, doesn't matter if you believe it or not, I'm only talking back to the point of people with the mentality that use and follow and believe in these things, right? Their belief says that the larger the sigil is, the stronger the effect of that spell. All right. So I want us to look at something. Look at a city map of Washington, D.C. I've pasted an image here of, if you go type Washington, D.C. right into Google Maps, you will see, if you zoom in, this exact same image. This is the orientation you would normally see looking at a regular map. All right, and we notice some of the famous tourist spots. The Washington Monument, shown in the blue circle there. Off to the east of that, the U.S. Capitol. And to the west of the monument, the Lincoln Memorial. And again, those who know the layout of Washington, D.C., you know that due north of the Washington Monument is the White House. Okay, so this is the layout of, again, where our seat of power is, the U.S. Capitol, the White House. If we zoom in, just going to point out a few things in the layout of the map here. Okay, I can take K Street Northwest from the George Washington Equestrian Statue and go due east on the road there, K Street Northwest, over to the southernmost part of Mount Vernon Square. I'm not sure what that other, I don't live in DC, so it's a little bit south of Mount Vernon Square. I'm not sure what that is right there, but they're connected by this road I've highlighted in red. Okay, we also have Massachusetts Avenue that connects that same point south of Mount Vernon Square up to DuPont Circle. That's the new red line I just added in there. Now we also have, I'm mapping out the street, which is Vermont Avenue that connects Logan Circle, and it points down towards Lafayette Circle. It doesn't go all the way to the White House, but it's close. And then we also have connecting DuPont Circle to Lafayette Square, Connecticut Avenue, that again is stopping at Lafayette, not going quite down to the White House. And last but not least, we have Rhode Island Avenue that connects Logan Circle, and it starts to head towards the George Washington Equestrian Statue, but it stops just short of it. Again, this is a map that is oriented exactly how the street is laid out. Okay, I've drawn a whole bunch of lines of connecting streets. So what, right? You probably don't see, maybe you do, see an image starting to emerge from that of the existing streets that are there. And you might say, well, it's a partial image, but it doesn't show the whole thing. I think it's pretty strongly implied. I think you can probably see that was the intent of what's drawn here without the actual streets, but I'll lay in, if you were to put those other connections there, if the direction of those streets were to finish in the black lines, you very clearly see the image of the inverted pentagram right there laid out in the streets of DC. And again, imagine witchcraft believes that the size of the sigil matters. You pretty much have the largest possible sigil that I know of anyway, overlaying the streets of our nation's capital right there in front of your eyes. Okay, and again, if you can't see it, it looks exactly like the symbol of Baphomet and the symbol that's used by the Satanic Church that we looked at earlier.
You see, we humans have a habit of thinking that groups in power have good intentions towards us at times that they do not. We tend to give a warm and trusting reception to those who tell you that they want to help you, those who appear to share some common ground with us, or those that say the things that you want to hear. Determining their true intent is usually as simple as observing what do they do when they stop talking. The H2N documentary beckons people of African descent to renew or restore their commitment to the entity worshipped as God while the Hebrews wandered the wilderness for 40 years. When a human being worships something, we invest a lot in the process, and I'm not just talking finances. We submit our free will according to what we think the worship entity desires of us. We condition ourselves to love and hate according to the leanings of the worship entity. We give our physical energy in the traveling to sacred sites, the performing of rituals, bowing, kneeling, praying, etc. We also forfeit a lot of time and mental energy, obsessing over all the facets of pleasing or displeasing the worship entity, leaving us to rejoice or repent, depending on how well we think we performed. We credit the worship entity with everything favorable that happens in our lives, and we carry extreme fear and guilt when we fall short of the rules listed on the wall. After being forcefully converted to Christianity, 83% of African Americans are still Christian today. The documentarian acknowledged the lingering evidence of curses pronounced 4,000 years ago in Deuteronomy 28, fitting those of African descent better than any other people group in modern times. In accordance with those curses, members of this group are often murder victims, both internally and externally inflicted. But it seems that this devoted service by a large part of this population is not enough. The worshipped entity in the wilderness has a claim to a body count in the scriptures approaching 3 million human beings, many of which are his own chosen people, despite the stated interest in the well-being of this group. A fear of that murderous wrath is then weaponized to extract the resources listed above, and while content to consume every bit of energy, devotion, praise, worship, wealth, and every tear your eye can muster, it appears that this worship entity still has no inclination towards lifting this curse, still not satisfied. Looking at the evidence of Deuteronomy 28's curses, persisting for the past 4,000 years, I'm beginning to think that this is the desired state of things, that the worship entity benefits more when we're vulnerable and subject to these curses. We begin the cycle by forfeiting every resource our physical form can give in an effort to find favor and improve our circumstances. But as these perpetual curses remain, we convince ourselves that it must not be enough, and we strive to give even more. This is usually the point that fear warns us to not accept this thought process, unless we invoke more of God's wrath, or have a little bit of good that we think we've received snatched from us. This flight response, as opposed to a fight response, to snap us back in line, brings me to a very personal reminder that I had recently. I saw myself in a movie, but I wasn't expecting to see myself there. I'm not credited in the cast. I didn't show up on a set. Nevertheless, as I was watching Will Smith's movie Emancipation, I saw myself there, clear as day. As I watched Will Smith's character arrive to work on the railroad site, I recognized myself in that scene. Metaphorically speaking, of course, I wasn't really in there. But I was once the man holding the Bible and preaching to the other slaves. The message I was given was meant to perpetuate the rule and expand the power of another who did not have my best interest in mind, no more than those I was preaching to. It was a message meant to disarm and subdue. This message was not sent on behalf of the Creator, as we were told and as I believed, because the Creator has no need for more power. The Creator is present everywhere in the entirety of creation. It has no need to subdue any living being. However, I am very aware of the effectiveness of this message and how strong that grip of fear can be towards one who shows a willingness to waste the lives of millions of people, simply to make an example. You guys have fun with that. I'm good. I'm more inclined to believe the words of the Lord Jesus that even a mildly decent human being would not treat his children that way. Much less would his Creator deal with his children that way. Our Creator would not waste millions of human lives, as we have seen in the scriptures. So if it wasn't the Creator that was being worshipped in the wilderness, what else would have the power to pronounce a curse that would persist for 4,000 years? You got to think, outside of curses pronounced by God, where else do we see curses common? Maybe you didn't pick up on the connection I was making earlier, the sidebar that I had there, but the 4,000-year curse was so effective because it's the type of self-serving and malicious spellcraft that we feed by our guilt, our fear, and our unwavering, unthinking service to the fiery serpent that was worshipped in the wilderness. In both politics and religion, we've been made to believe that we are serving greater powers who care about us. And in both cases, what we are serving actually deploys malicious spellcraft against us to drain us of resources. That's why we see city-sized inverted sigils on our nation's capital, that group that has enough confidence in the meaning of the inverted pentagram and the added strength conferred to it by its enormous size, also believe in the power of the upright pentagram, which is why they tell you that it's demonic. These people know how afraid and how obedient the masses become when they're told they're doing something against God or that God will punish them for. It's the perfect cover. They have as much confidence in the effect and the power of the inverted pentagram for evil as they do the upright pentagram for good. They believe it will level the playing field, thus they need it to disarm the benevolent. The parallels are in plain sight, it's not even hidden. The oppressors deploy spellcraft against you, but then tell you that spellcraft that can counteract their efforts is off limit to you. This fits a very familiar pattern, going all the way back to the Garden of Eden. of forbidding mankind access to certain knowledge or of learning spellcraft, and punishing those who try to give mankind this knowledge. In the Garden of Eden, it is said that mankind encountered a being whose name, we're later told, means light bearer, and he warned man that they weren't being told the entire story. The tree they were told to avoid, a tree said to convey knowledge of good and evil, would actually make them more like their creators, who confirmed that this was the case. I should say more like their engineers. In Genesis 3:22, we read, "Behold, the man has become as one of us, to know good and evil, after they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil." Now, I'm not playing devil's advocate here. I'm advocating that who they encountered was not the devil at all. No more than it was God killing and commanding the worship of the image of the fiery serpent in the wilderness. My character assassination of God series on this channel lays out how the biblical God from the Old Testament is actually an amalgamation of two God characters, Enki and Enlil, when you read the Babylonian or Sumerian creation account that Abraham was raised on, which was a clear predecessor to the biblical creation account. Enki was the character who consistently pitied mankind, encouraging them to pursue knowledge in the garden, and the one that warned Noah how to escape the flood. His brother Enlil was the aggressor in both cases. Notice that the light bearer didn't punish us. Their God was the aggressor who decided to punish all parties involved. The light bearer wasn't privy, as we understand, to the entire plan. He didn't know what was going to happen. He only knew that the oppressed, knowledgeless human beings were being deceived. The Book of Enoch tells a similar tale. This so-called God dispatched the watchers, who many believe are angels, but later cast them out of heaven, marking them as the fallen ones, because they gave mankind knowledge of things they weren't intended to have, like spellcraft. You have to consider that if the knowledge was so evil, why would angels that are supposedly in God's presence all the time, even have this knowledge to share? The knowledge itself, like spellcraft, must not be inherently evil. It depends on how you use it. And humanity's creators just didn't want us to have that knowledge. We're later told that these fallen watchers become the worst, most dreaded, evil, murderous leaders of all the demons in hell. This reminds me of the way that our government treats its whistleblowers. They're the most respected, honored, and intelligent members of their field, as long as they play by the rules. As soon as they don't, we're told that they're incompetent, uneducated, discredited, just the worst of the worst human beings possible. You should consider that these fallen watchers were once considered good company by God, until they violated. So you have to ask yourself the question, did they really change after being cast out, or did they just change their allegiance? I believe the knowledge conveyed to us by the fallen ones would have leveled the playing field between us and our oppressors, as knowledge has always done. You have to think, how can the same being work so hard to restrict mankind's knowledge in the garden, but then make statements like this in Hosea 4:6, "My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you." When you think of a being who has murdered humans in the millions, who do you think of? You think of Hitler. When you think of oppressors who are willing to kill and punish to keep useful knowledge out of the hands of those who serve them, what do you think of? Slaveholders. Well, these honors also go to the so-called God of the Old Testament. While this being claims to have good intentions towards humanity, fear has afforded the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam a following of 52% of the Earth's 7.9 billion people. Governments have taken note of religious exploitations, and they do the same to convince you to willingly forfeit your resources for next to nothing in return. You have freely given your patriotism, which is itself a form of blind worship. You've given your votes, your commitment to their agenda to do harm to other people groups, your patentable creativity and ideas, and your contribution to their financial system in a variety of ways. Your taxes, our hyper-consumerism, all which feed the corruption in favor of the wealthy, and so many other things. Human leadership and government are perfect examples of entities that will do whatever it takes to gain your patriotism, just so that they can exploit you. There's plenty of evidence that proves they really don't have your best interest in mind. Why does the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1985 and 86 state that no vaccine manufacturer can be held liable in any civil action for damages arising from vaccine-related injury or death, in response to them being constantly sued for death and damages? If you do take one of these companies to court, you actually face the U.S. government in court and not the company themselves. Think about Citizens United. Once permitted to act as a citizen, the vast wealth that corporations can amass by putting profit over people always sways our legislative powers via lobbying more than any individual citizen or a group of citizens could ever do. They seem totally unable to do their one job, which is legislate on behalf of the people. Banks and mortgage companies were allowed to steal more money than has ever been stolen from the public in history, and they got a free pass. Think about if JFK was killed by a lone actor in 1963, as we're told. Why was President Trump denied and told there were national security risks to declassify those same files in 2017? Because those records would reveal the involvement of U.S. government officials. That's why. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was a hoaxed event that allowed the American war machine to spin up, join the conflict in Vietnam, and create a fortune at the mere cost of 58,000 soldiers' lives, which is, of course, sarcasm. This has a lot of similarities to the Cuban Missile Crisis that the military-industrial complex tried to goad JFK into 1 year prior. One of the reasons why they killed him, because he wouldn't play ball. How can the U.S. have been so appalled at the heinous acts of the Nazi regime when the Nazis modeled part of their final solution after America's own Jim Crow laws? Also, why were 1,200 Nazi officers, not just little petty guys who were just following orders, the leaders of the Nazi regime, the ones who were guilty of orchestrating the worst of Germany's war crimes, then brought to America and allowed leading positions in our government? Think about why were Nikola Tesla's notes on how to achieve free wireless electricity like his Wardenclyffe Tower. Why were those notes, why were those inventions never released? Aside from the fact that it was making JP Morgan a whole lot richer by keeping them under wraps. And if you think about why were these people who had info that would have improved the quality of life for the masses, for millions of people worldwide, all executed? Bill Colby, Stan Meyer, Alan Dulles, Dr. Paul Maurice Brown, Bill Cooper, James Forrestal, and many, many more. And then think of the unjustified and unending conflicts to exploit weaker countries and weaker people worldwide. The evil that caused the Hebrews to worship the brass image of the fiery serpent have also caused the architects, at the very least the architects of our capital, convincing them to continue the serpent religion and sigils, to maintain the curses listed in Deuteronomy 28 against the descendants of the Hebrews and anyone else that they can. We should not be falling over ourselves to reclaim worship to this entity that has hated us enough to punish us for 4,000 years. These entities rely on the fear and guilt that it forces on us to bleed humanity dry in every possible way. We should cast off these curses we've been, quote, chosen to, and return to the intent of the true Creator by finding ways to see the Creator in everyone. This narrative of a chosen people can be as destructive and as dangerous as Hitler's pursuit of a pure race. These are just two different sides of the same serpent coin. We do justice to our Creator by empowering every soul to be their best self, not looking for a supreme or a chosen group. This mindset was used in the Hebrews' past as justification for the genocide of multiple neighboring nations. Let's not repeat the same errors of the past. Let's do better. The pain and fear caused from these events was enough fuel to perpetuate these curses having a hold on us until now, when we finally allow ourselves to be aware of our Creator's true nature and agree to become a reflection of that character. This is the only way we will ever break the curse and begin the path of healing that this planet needs. So again, not a popular conclusion. I do see the evidence and verses that I've known about for a while that's shown in the documentary that says, yes, they probably had some amount of color to them. Varies. I don't care. Doesn't matter, right? Because if ultimately the conclusion is, let's go back to where we were
and please this entity that's had 4,000 years of curses that still seem to be lingering amongst our people. It must be comfortable there. It's getting something, some kind of whatever, satisfaction, even if it's just the confirmation that its words take heed. But if you look at video 6 or episode 6 on my channel, you'll understand why I'm thinking that this really is not the kind of entity that we want to be clamoring back to go worship. And the being that pronounces those kind of long-standing curses and lets people wallow in them, I think we can do better. And I think if we cast off the guilt and the fear, I think it starts to break the hold. And we don't need to have a chosen people. People are the chosen people. And I think that we can find a way to kind of work ourselves through this, not listening to the extreme voices, not listening to the canceled voices or those that want to cancel them for that matter either, right? But we can find a better way through this by shutting out the extreme voices, listen to our better nature, and I think we can find a better resolution and a better way through this. I'm not going to rally against the people that carry that name now, or people that think that that's their whatever, their birthright. Let's figure out a way forward to make sure that we are doing things that are going to be productive, beneficial, and positive.
Hey, thanks for watching our video and sharing with us one of your most important resources, your time. Continue to seek truth, reclaim your knowledge, your existence, and your reality. And you already know how this works. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want to help this channel work towards a better future. But most importantly, I hope this channel has helped you. Take care.